Hi, everyone, and welcome back to GEM. What if there were aspects of yourself that were visible, but not in the way that we normally think of being seen? Today's guest is Indy from Aura Within Us, whose mission is to help people see themselves clearly and come home to their own light. Through aura photography and energy analysis, he works with individuals to explore their patterns, their strengths, challenges, areas of opportunity for growth through the lens of their energetic field. So, whether you are completely new to this concept or you've been curious about auras before, today's conversation will explore what we're looking at when we actually view the aura, whether our energy can change over time, and how that greater awareness of ourselves may help us navigate life with greater clarity. So, Indy, I want to welcome you to GEM.
Thanks. It's really great to be here and to chat with you about this subject, something that I'm really passionate about.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you being here. So, for someone who is completely new to this, what is the aura or the energy field? And what are we seeing when someone actually has their aura photographed?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty magical. I think once you start to understand just kind of how dynamic the universe is, we're all made of energy. It's one of the first things that we learn about electrons and protons, neutrons. And essentially, energy surrounds us in every part of our life, whether it's a rock, whether it's, an animal, or even, looking into space. And, I think people, when they first hear about auras, like, oh, well, this is very mystical, or like, how can I relate to this? And I think it's not mystical in that sense because we are surrounded by energy. It's just how you visualize, how you understand and perceive the energy, as it relates to yourself and kind of like what you're feeling, what kind of emotions that you're going through. But somebody who's completely new to this space is, like let's say if you walk into a room and you get a sense from somebody that, wow, like this is really powerful, feeling that I'm getting from them. That's essentially their aura. So it's not like something that is so abstract that you can't understand it.
Mm.
Even feel like somebody or something like you get goosebumps like in a good way. That's you interacting with somebody else's aura field potentially. A lot of people who have like love at first sight, it's your auras clashing essentially in some cases because the energies that surround us and surround other people is like how we essentially it's like the universal handshake is the way that I try to look at it. And we'll get into some of the dynamics in terms of like left and right and so on and so forth. But I think for somebody who's completely new, it's really your emotional state, your mental activity, your physical vitality. It's all those things kind of wrapped up in an instance, and that's how the color is represented.
That's pretty powerful when you think about it from that like very basic lens. What can someone's aura reveal about all of those things that you talked about, like their emotions, their mental state, their spiritual well-being?
Yeah, I mean, so when I think about auras, and I mean, it's really, we're in this journey of life. So when we think about, when you're growing up, you don't really know your personality. You're still kind of figuring out the dynamics of the world. And, let's say you're a teenager, you're still, kind of like starting to identify with, who you are as a person and like who your friends are and kind of like your likes and dislikes. You know, Throughout each of those different journeys, your aura could be different in those different in those times. I think what we're starting to realize now doing over 5,000 aura photos is that it's really dependent upon, your age. It's really dependent on, where you are in terms of, are you comfortable, where you are? Are you looking for something new? Are you, um, uh, just kind of like unsure of where you are in your world or in this place. I think a lot of things that we start to see is like the purpose people I think people in general like to be purposeful, right? Like you want to know what your purpose is, like what are you trying to achieve in this life? And I think the most powerful thing with the auras is, as it relates to like your emotional state. Like we had one example where this one gentleman completely, was not comfortable where he was, in
You
his
mean
life.
within his life?
Yeah, within his life. And we took his aura and he's like, oh, I'm going to be black, aren't I? And it was like, the deepest green that you've ever seen. And green actually means growth and it means balance and harmony.
Oh,
And
wow.
I listen, your emotional state is not great now, but look
Hmm.
at this. You are embodying, balance and harmony and love essentially. You just need to get back to that.
I love
And
I got
that
goosebumps when you were saying that.
and that just shows like, how powerful this is. Like sometimes it can be validating, which I love, in terms of like, you getting your aura done, or it could be, oh, I didn't even think about that, or I don't see myself like that.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about this is, as I've started to learn, and I'm not like the expert, there's a whole bunch of OGs in the space, and we've been doing this for a couple of years, but you start to empathize with people and you get to understand them. And the most powerful thing for me is like that first person who, for example, there was this, we were at Heart of Oneness in Edison, New Jersey for a for an expo, and there's a lot of those people are there for wellness and healing and so on and so forth, but and a lot of them sometimes are unfamiliar with aura, but they're
Hmm.
willing to try it. The amount of people that broke down crying in terms of them seeing like spirits or past loved ones, who are represented in those colors, and then being able to like, wow, I can't believe that this person was with me, or that they are bringing this type of energy into my energy frame.
Ooh,
Uh, Powerful that it
yeah.
can be like life transformational, is probably
So
the best
let
way to put it.
I think that's amazing. And I want to break it down a little bit for our viewers. So can you help us understand if there are different colors and what those colors generally represent?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me actually do this. We do have something that I can share on the screen here, and you guys let me know if this works. Do you see that?
Not yet. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yep.
Okay. So essentially, the way, and we can definitely focus on the colors. So this is kind of like our color cheat sheet essentially, and this is obviously very condensed for our discovery aura guide, which everybody gets when they come in, or when we have an event. But if you go on our website, we have a lot more information, and if anybody's really interested, there's books upon books on this. But there's several different colors for sure. As we look at the entire rainbow and the entire spectrum, I'll just hit on a couple of them because I think to go through this, it would probably take a couple of hours
Yeah.
if we really wanted to spend the time.
We'll do high level for now.
High level for now, but when we think about white, it's really frequency of purity, really transcend. We focus on a couple of different key areas when we're explaining the colors and what they mean. And you have so the color, the personality, kind of how it relates to chakra, the key traits of that color. And then we've tried to go above and beyond and saying, if you're trying to unlock this specific area, these are the different crystals or essential oils
Mm.
that you utilize to really awaken those spaces. So, I mean, you can see here we go all the way from white, which is kind of like, ethereal. So I'm kind of like pointing out to the universe, going down to red, which is all about kind of vitality in your root chakra. So if you're familiar with the seven chakras, you start with your root chakra and you go all the way up to the crown chakra, which is right here, right? Um, and it was really important that we started to kind of like recognize that and show people like where are you in terms of the stage of your life? Are you more kind of, embodied in like where we are in the present tense, or are you kind of like leaning more to like the universal energies?
Mm,
Um, Take a look at some of the colors here. I mean, white, frequency of purity. So white obviously is like every color, right? And it's very celestial, very ethereal. You have like a good in tune with that you're open-minded, that you're divinely connected. That sometimes shows up very rare, or people who are either very spiritual or just have like an in it's just intuitive for them,
yeah.
able to kind of bring out some of those colors. You have violet, which is like what we call the frequency of vision. So these are people are visionaries. They're spiritual, either very spiritual, mainly focused on the crown chakra. So again, right here, very dynamic, very charismatic, radiant people. And I think what the beauty of this one is, again, you don't have to be spiritual in order for you to show up in violet. You could be just like somebody who's very innovative or very have that kind of intuition. Sometimes, when you think about violet, and even indigo to an extent, is like when you have deja vu, right? And sometimes, like, I just saw that. Where did I see that? But it's like you being so in tune with the universe and being able to kind of draw upon those energies.
Love that.
A couple of the other like ones that come up quite often, you have blue, which is like frequency of serenity. So we call these people the mediators, very honest, nurturing types. New mothers typically show up sometimes in blue, or like a blue, blue green. People who kind of like wear their heart on their sleeve, essentially, or like just want to make sure it's always calm, like, nothing crazy. And you can see here that this is really around the throat chakra. So, being able to deliver and being able to communicate is so important to these people. Typically, like if you know about Reiki and if you know about chakra balancing, somebody who typically is a mediator and may start having sore throats all the time is because their throat chakra is closed.
Mm,
And I'm a Reiki master. My wife is a Reiki master teacher, so I always default to all of the all the wellness to her. But if you can't get out something and you're a blue,
yeah.
in terms of your personality aura, that could be really kind of detrimental to you. And people have sometimes breakdowns if they can't communicate with their wife or their spouse or anybody in their family. And these people are very authentic too. Another one that I would want to call attention to is green. So you have frequency of growth. Typically, we call these people the healers, very peaceful, very patient. They lead with their heart. So green is related to the heart chakra. And these people really wear their heart on their sleeve. It's like this is how they meet the world, from a place of just balance and harmony, and essentially just like really good vibes, right? I think I always stress like that all colors, no matter where you are in your life, there's a positivity that you can kind of spin on it. Obviously, there's negative aspects to colors too, and it's really dependent on like how you see the world and kind of where you are in that point in time. But
Mhm.
hopefully this kind
And
of gives a little idea to the folks that are listening in.
yeah.
I think it's really powerful because obviously every single color can kind of lead you in a different way,
And
which is
just to
beautiful.
make a point to that, it's not that one person is just one color necessarily. If someone were to come to you and get their aura photo done, you might see a few of these colors on the actual photo.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And that's why, it's so important. I'll zoom in over here a little bit. That's why it's so important to kind of look at the different areas of your aura. So, the way that we look at this is there's five distinct areas. You have your top, which is your cognizance, your aspirations. It's like, when you think about positivity, or positive affirmations, right? So that's like we're always thinking about something. We're always trying to get something done. So that's your top aura. Then you kind of move to the middle. That's your personality. Like how have you become the person that you are? Who are you at your deepest core? That's really your personality. It's kind of like what is inside of you, right? If you move down to the bottom, this is like where your foundation and your grounding is. How have you become the person that you are? And when you need help or assistance or you're celebrating, what is your grounding and what is your foundation? Where do you dig in deep to get, those different aspirations or those colors as it relates to being able to like help you get through things in good ways and bad. And then on the right side, you have, so this person is kind of like sitting like facing us. And that's kind of how we look at the aura photographs. So on your right side, this is energy that you express.
Hmm.
It's really how you see the world. It's more of a pass, more of a masculine energy. So that typically how I relate it is you can only give what's yours, and you own your own energy. Your energy is in your center. So I always say center right. So this is energy that you're expelling when you shake somebody's hand, when you give somebody a hug. You're going in, and there's an energy exchange that happens there, and it's beautiful, right? And sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not intentional,
Mm.
but that's the expressive energy. Now, on the left side, this is more receptive, it's more feminine. And it's like, what kind of energy that you're looking to bring in from the world, essentially. And, it's how I relate this is, what you are manifesting, what your conscious is becomes your left side. So, everything that you're thinking about, whether you're writing a book and you want to be an author, right? You want to get that out on paper. You're very driven. You might be asking the universe, give me the action, like, stop, make me more action oriented so I can write this, so I can get my book done and like publish, right? Or you might be thinking, let me, I'm in an environment that's very chaotic. I just want to, be focused on balance and harmony, or even like a nurturing environment. So give me some calm, give me some peace, right? And so you might be thinking, potentially a blue or a green, and then how is that translating? I'm a big believer in positivity and affirmations, and when I look at, when you do that, you're asking the universe in such a way to give you those types of energies.
I love that too. And so, from a lot of what you've said, this is all really based on where we are within ourselves and within a period of time. So, based on that, I would assume that your aura colors can change over the evolution of your life. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so our colors, constantly can change. And, the way that our software typically looks at these things is we ask you to sit down for about 30 to 45 seconds, sometimes longer if we're kind of like, okay, the colors are still like, all over the place. But typically after 30 to 45 seconds, we can kind of get through your short term. And really that kind of shows you where you are in your stage of life as of now. Now, typically, like your center personality shouldn't change dramatically.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is like it may, kind of like go from one color to the other from time to time. So, like if you're an indigo, you may go back to like a blue, or you might go to like a violet, kind of like within like, that span of things.
Hmm.
Um, or depending on if like you're a yellow, yellow, orange, red, kind of like are all kind of close to each other, right? So you might kind of, vary in that regard. And so your personality aura shouldn't typically change dramatically unless you are very intently trying to change it. Now, what can change dramatically, depending on external factors, is really on the outs, your top right and your left as it relates to, are you thinking about something different intentionally? Or are you asking for more healing energy because you're going through some type of chaotic or, traumatic experience? Or maybe you're going in for an interview and your right side, you're trying to express confidence and passion and drive for this job. So I will say, it really is dependent on where you are and kind of like what are you trying to accomplish and where you are, in that stage of your life. As we, I've done a lot of research now, but younger folks, typically might show up with more red, or maybe they're looking for more balance in their life, or like, what is the purpose of my life? Where am I trying to go? What am I trying to do? Whereas in typically people who have had a really healthy and a great life, at the end of their life, they're just like, have I made a difference?
Mm.
my life's purpose. And you might show more purples, right? You might show more transcendence or you're trying to connect more divinely because you're kind of going closer, to that light essentially. But you definitely can change. And it really depends on kind of like where you are in your stage of life for sure.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it could be both a conscious or an unconscious type of process where you're actively looking to change your colors because you're focusing on new ways of being and existing, or it happens gradually because of some of those life events or situations that might push you in a different direction potentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, do you ever see moments where someone's aura might reflect something that's very different from how they're currently living? I think you kind of insinuated it in an example earlier, but is that
Mhm.
does that happen often?
So I think that if you're asking the question is like, do we get the aura wrong? Maybe.
Or like
And
not
I'll
necessarily wrong, but like maybe how a person perceives how they are versus who they really are? Or does that happen more often than not?
No, typically, so the beauty of this is like even in our home studio, we typically will have like friends or family come through, or even like when we have the big events, it's like really validating, and people are like, oh yeah, of course you're that, like of course you're orange, you're so social, you're like a social butterfly, or like if you show up as yellow, you're like a bright sun, and people come to you because you inspire them, and you're joyful and you're hopeful. It's been more validating than someone who's kind of like, oh, that's not me type of thing. Like I said, there was a couple of examples where someone may not have felt that they were in a good place, or maybe they were kind of like, oh, well, I thought I was more red, or I'm very passionate, I'm very driven, and potentially they were, but what their body and what their aura was telling them was they weren't in a good state of balance.
Yeah.
So maybe they were looking for more, it was too chaotic because they were trying to get so much done,
Mm.
right? And their aura maybe showed up as blue, right? And they were looking for nurturing and healing, either from their partner or from their environment that they're in. And that can sometimes be very different. They're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. But actually, that kind of makes sense because I'm like all over the place and I feel that I'm doing a million different things. And yeah, I am very driven. And sometimes people just want to be like, that's what my aura needs to show. And sometimes it does show up that way. We had somebody who had just started a small business and they were completely red. Um, right. And I think they were so focused on that it kind of engulfed their entire aura. And sometimes you will see multiple different colors, and sometimes you'll see, entire one color. And that really is kind of like where you are in the stage of your life where it kind of becomes engulfing. I'll tell you, like I'm typically an honest nurturer. So when I kind of hit my peak meditation, or like where I'm in my headspace, I become completely blue. So I'm, all about authenticity. I'm all about people, um, being able to learn more about themselves, and that's what's like a big driver for me. So I like to, I'm a nurturing soul, I like to say, and people will validate that for me. So like I knew that that was about me.
Hmm.
Sometimes might not feel that they're in a a good way. I was talking to my mom, and she's very spiritual, super spiritual, also um, Reiki master teacher, I think too. But also like light energies. She's done everything, and we typically when we do her aura, it's like all purple, right? Because she's exhibiting a lot of those energies, and sometimes even like periods of white because she acknowledges all cultures, she accepts all cultures, she's so open-minded
That's
that
wonderful.
she all those universal energies in. And in those cases it's very validating, but like I said, like sometimes depending on where people are, you can get the validation through like your friends or family essentially.
Yeah.
uh, and I think that's really beautiful too. That if you don't feel that way, it's not because that's not your color. It might also be that you just haven't opened those colors up. So that's why it's so important to have the crystals and the essential oils I'm a big believer in support tools, just like, we use computers to help us or, anything to, from a tools perspective. These are just kind of like items that will help you to unlock some of these. Obviously, you can go for alternative wellness like chakra balancing, Reiki, so on and so forth. And these are just like ways of therapy to unlock certain colors or certain dynamics of your color to bring about your best self.
I appreciate you mentioning it that way because, again, it's one of very many tools that individuals can use to help get them to that greater state of presence and being while we're here on Earth. So, everything that you're saying is really just reinforcing that this is a tool to help navigate life in a sense.
Yeah.
And if you're seeing something that maybe you want to change, you have the ability now through this visualization to redirect your energy in another way.
It's so true. Like the way that when I first started learning about this and we got into auras to really support my wife's business, which is the Inner Hum. And it's all about sound healing, it's all about Reiki, alternative wellness. And many of her clients, who had gone through multi weeks and sometimes months were saying, how do I know, right? How do I know I've changed? Or
Mm,
how do I unlock certain areas? And we were kind of like scratching our head, like there must be a way, right? To show people in a meaningful way. And we are humans, right? We expect we expect things to be sometimes concrete or being able to be tangible to us. And the more that we started learning, we were kind of like, you know what? Aura photography, let's think about this. Let's learn a little bit more about this. And we really got into the space to really support that and to kind of show people the before and after. And we've done so, she does sound healings and actually nervous system resets, which is like a multitude of different alternative wellness, where she'll take a snapshot before and then afterwards, and essentially completely different auras.
oh wow.
And you're able to see like when people have like unlocked certain areas, and they can feel it,
That's so
right?
fascinating.
It, which is the beauty. So not only do they feel it, and I would imagine everybody who's gone through an alternative, once you have gone through a sound healing, and I'm not sure if you've gone through one before, Jen, but
Hmm.
things feel more attuned, or you feel more in tune, and you just feel more alive. And just like colors have frequency, sound healing opens a lot of these frequencies up. Everything is all about sound and it's all about the colors that we're able to visualize. They're all part of the same connectivity.
Oh, I love that too.
The most amazing thing is like when you go through these alternative wellnesses, and you're able to unlock certain areas. It could be very healing principle based, or it could be mental, or it could be emotional. And then that's how you're able to show the different colors and show the tangible aspects of of being able to look at your aura and being able to see, where you are and where you need to, where you might have some ability to work on.
So, just for anybody who is feeling maybe disconnected right now from themselves and their energetic field, what would you want them to remember out of everything that, you shared with us today?
Yeah, I think so. We've done quite a bit over the last couple of years, and I think the beauty of this work is that you get to learn more about people in general. And I think, if you're not in a good place right now, excuse me, it's a moment in time.
Mm.
And that, we're all on this journey of life together. And, I know the world is a crazy place, probably now more than ever, or at least it feels that way. But, when you think about auras, when you think about just alternative wellness space, is how can you ground yourself first and foremost? And everybody grounds in a different way, right? And I think whether it's, go touch grass, as people say, or go meditate in a quiet place, or go to the beach, go hiking. allow yourself to just introspect a little bit, find your commonality, your common place in terms of grounding, and then everything else will kind of come through there afterwards. It'll all become more transparent. Aura photography just shows you kind of a little bit of what that other world looks like. But for someone who's unknown to the space overall, just find your grounding factor first. If you go into a crystal shop, what crystals pop out at you? Like what calls at you,
Yeah,
right?
that's a great one.
I think that in itself, like from what I've learned about the space and Reiki, is find yourself first and foremost. Obviously, it sounds easier than not, but if something brings you peace, obviously, when it's not hurting, if it's not hurting anybody else, but you kind of like figure that spot out, allow yourself to just give yourself to time and grace, and then focus on that. And then the rest of the answers will show up in a
We'll fall into
meaningful way.
place. Indy, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been an absolute pleasure just hearing your perspective, hearing about auras. And for anybody who would like to learn more from Indy and about Aura Within Us, you can actually find links and information in our episode description. But as we've talked about, wherever you are in your journey, I hope that this conversation really encourages you to stay curious about yourself, trust what resonates with you, and then continue finding your way back to what feels the most true for you. So thank you all for listening. Thank you again, Indy, and I'll
Thanks,
see you in
Jen.
the next episode.